Have you ever felt like life was a struggle? Last year I decided to go for a walk out along our local pier. It was a gorgeous sunny day and the water in the bay was super flat. Not quite glassy, but there was no swell and barely any ripples on the surface of the water. There was barely any breeze at all and everything was still. And just as I walked up to the start of the pier, I noticed a guy in the distance on a stand-up paddleboard. He was out near the end of the pier, about 10 metres or so off to one side. Now, his presence in itself wasn't unusual. There are heaps of people who get out and about on paddleboards near the pier when the conditions are calm. What was really weird on this particular day was the amount of splashing going on. Now, Paddle Guy was right down near the far end of the pier, and not only could I see a heap of splashing, I could hear it too. And he was really a long way away from me. Now, as I walked out to the end of the pier, Paddle Guy ducked underneath the pier and through to the other side, still making heaps of splash and seemingly working really hard to get the little bit of slow movement he was making in the water. He was huffing and puffing and using his whole body to stab the paddle into the water at a weird angle. A woman called out from the pier, that looks like a really good workout. Paddle Guy puffed, it sure is, back as he kept stabbing at the water. Now, if you're not familiar with stand-up paddleboards, they're like an oversized surfboard that people stand up on, and their operators use a long-handled, single-bladed paddle at one end and a handle gripped it's kind of shaped like a T at the other end. Now, everyone I've seen paddling one of these boards, especially in gorgeous calm conditions like the ones on this day at the pier, seems to glide majestically through the water. Now, even when people are racing each other, there really isn't that much splash. And, well, Paddle Guy was different. There was splash everywhere. And despite the fact he was working hard, he wasn't getting a great return on the huge amount of energy he was investing. He was barely moving. Now that I was closer, I could see what was happening. Paddle Guy had the blade of his slightly scooped paddle turned around the wrong way. He was using it backwards. That's why he was splashing so much, because as he pushed the blade through the water, instead of digging in and propelling his board forward, the water was instead being pushed up the scooped back of the paddle and turned into splash that was going everywhere. Because his method was so ineffective, Paddle Guy had to make up for it by doubling his work rate. And because he was getting such a cardio workout, his paddle strokes were suffering. Here's the thing though. Paddle Guy wasn't even aware that he had a problem. He probably thought that struggling to make progress was just the way that paddleboarding was. Every single human being on our planet is familiar with the feeling of struggle, although, to be fair, some struggles are bigger than others. If you're in the middle of a struggle that seems so big you can't see past it right now, I'm here to tell you that God has had a plan for you since before you were born. And that plan was not for you to live a life of struggle. Jeremiah chapter 29 verse 11 says that God's plan was to prosper you and not to harm you. It's a plan to give you both a hope and a future. So how do you move past the struggles and find out more about God's plan for you? Well, Paddle Guy was struggling because although he technically had all the right equipment, no one had taken him the time to show him how to use it. As a Christian, when life is a struggle, whether that's a big struggle or a nagging feeling that there must be more to life than this, we don't tend to discuss it with anyone else. When it comes to separation and divorce, there aren't too many Christian leaders who speak on the things you need to hear from a position of lived experience. I can safely say that these Thrive messages will be about a lot more than divorce and remarriage. They'll help you step away from a life of struggle and into the purpose and calling God planned for you before you were even born. A plan to prosper you, give you a hope, and give you a future that is beyond anything you can imagine right now. If that's something you want to know more about, then make sure you subscribe and get notifications for when new Thrive episodes are released. Also, if you have a friend who might benefit from this message, make sure you share it with them. And if you're here watching because somebody shared this with you and you got something out of being here, now's the time to message your friend to say thanks before you get stuck into the next message. Until next time, blue skies.